of the contract and metrics to evaluate success of the contract and the representative. Basically, what have you set up so far? What will success look like? How will you measure that? And then on January 15th of 23, they would come back again to report on the type and number of business contacts and engagement, the type of businesses, jobs, and wages brought to the state, if any, and then recommendations concerning the continuation or expansion of the program. So I think you can gather from that it's not envisioned to be a permanent commitment. It's a rather sort of a 2-year trial. Let's see if this bears fruit, what success looks like, and whether we should move forward.
Did we have something like this previously? It seems like we did a lot of business with Canada.
I believe the Lake Champlain Chamber had a direct Canada relationship for a while. There have been positions in the agency and, previous generations where there's been more of a direct foreign trade connection. I couldn't tell you the entire history, but yes.
I seem to remember Brian Doobie having a lot of connections here somehow.
Yes, I recall that as well. And one thing he did as lieutenant governor, I think, when he was doing that. I'd also love to know the scope of Tim Tierney's work in relation to this proposal and how that expands, that because he's a one-person band, I think. So, anyway, I'd love to discuss.
Okay, we can have him in. The $300,000, is that the amount suggested in the governor's budget for this? Was this in the governor's budget?
It is an administration proposal. To be honest, I don't remember the amount of money originally requested.
Did the committee talk about the budget at all, how they came up with 300,000?
I'm sure they did. I was not present for it.
It looks like it's a person and some office space, maybe. I don't know. It does.
Okay.
I'm just going to check the chart and see if it was included in their original proposal, because I don't think it was.
I just want to say, if we don't have metrics for what success would look like in this area, I think that's a problem. I mean, we've had enough investment in this area to know what I think we're looking for. I'm just going to register now. I don't know that it's worth spending money to figure out what metrics of success we would have for this kind of position. That seems backwards to me. We should already have metrics to know if this kind of position is useful.
Right. I mean, given they are our largest trading partner,
yeah,
there must be some. So those are questions to ask, I think. I agree.
Yeah, I'm just registering a deep concern.
David, your understanding of this is that the way I read this, $300,000 is appropriated one-time money in fiscal year 22, but it's supposed to pay for a 2-year contract?
That's the proposal, yes.
Okay.
It says up to 2 years, I think, because there's certainly the possibility that after 1 year, nothing has happened and you pull the plug.
Okay. Let's move past section 10, which is the state colleges, and go to section 11.
Yep. So sorry for the scrolling here. So section 11 relates to micro business development program, the Embrace program. It's $200,000. It is general fund to DCF, Office of Economic Opportunity, for pass-through grants to the community action agencies for funding the regional micro business development programs, and then $2 million of ARPA money, also DCF to CAAs for the Embrace program to assist the most disadvantaged Vermont micro business owners impacted by COVID-19 business closure. So you'll need a JFO person to help you understand the full scope of micro business and Embrace funding, because there's money here and in the budget and in H315. And I frankly, that's a JFO question on what the totals are.
Okay. What is the difference between the 200,000 and the 2 million? One is for Embrace and the other is for micro business development programs.
Right. Embrace, I believe, is the technical assistance arm provided through the community action agencies. So it's the people that are embracing the businesses and enabling the micro business development with their population that they serve through the community action agencies. I
So
think-
that's it. So just, that's the way I read it as well, but it seems to be sort of flipped on its head, doesn't it? That you put $2 million into support and only $200,000 into
Yeah,
pro.
well,
into
let's get
grants.
in and figure that out.
So
I
it's
agree.
200 for the standing program, and again, I think that 200 GF above is to supplement their base funding for the permanent program. The 2 million is ARPA funds, and it's specifically for Embrace, which is targeted, around COVID. So again, I think you should get them in for more specifics, but it's the difference between the existing
okay.
statutory program and the COVID program.
Okay, so, but the way I read this, it says to assist the most disadvantaged owners impacted with access to grants and technical assistance. So it could be both grant money and technical assistance
Yes,
in that $2 million.
yes.
Okay.
And grants from other places as well, not just from the CAAs, but other grant sources.
Okay, I hadn't realized Embrace essentially is those grants to micro businesses that are tied to somehow COVID. Yep.
All right, but are you ready to
Listen.
move to 12? I know I'm
Yes,
burning through time here.
Yes.
We have all these witnesses waiting.
Yeah, I'll be quick here. So this section 12, state BIPOC business development. We can skip the intent for now. There's important words in the intent and findings, but you'll see basically that there was the Vermont Partnership for Fairness and Diversity. The survey concluded core recommendations: form a state BIPOC commission, create BIPOC business association, and improve data collection and state understanding of BIPOC business needs. But all that said, this does not create those things. It does tell the Secretary of State in the business portal to collect data about new business formations and the demographics of business formations, but the project itself is this $100,000 through ACCD, which would provide funding for a contractor. And that contractor would convene BIPOC businesses, organizations, community leaders, and working with the executive director of racial equity and the racial equity advisory panel would come up with an RFP, select the contractor would go to work, and basically the contractor would facilitate this process of identifying, what's the best format, what's the best path forward for assisting BIPOC businesses. Is it in fact creating a business support network? Is it creating something within state government or outside of state government? It's really intended to be a process that is facilitated by a contractor, but led by the community. And then that process should result in recommendations.
So what did the administration suggest in this area initially?
I would not say they suggested anything specific in this regard. This was a proposal that Representatives Jerome and Mulvaney Stanek worked on with Joan Goldstein and Susanna Davis and others, many others. I was not involved in the origins of the concept, but I worked with them to refine this language. And the Commerce Committee accepted that as an addition to this bill and moved it forward.
For some reason, I thought there was something in the governor's budget to move this forward, maybe more than just 100,000 and maybe more than just a contractor. Am I mistaken in that regard?
Well, and they have different proposals that have, reservation of funds for BIPOC-owned businesses, but I don't recall an administration proposal that was specific to this sort of facilitated process for the BIPOC community. I don't remember that.
Okay.
That doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Yeah, I could be mistaken. Okay, so we're down to seed capital.
Yep. So this is built upon the fast capital proposal that came in at the end of last year, but was not able to be funded because it was not CARES Act eligible. Because the ARPA funds do appear to be more flexible. Well, no, that's not true. This is still general fund. So this is a $900,000 GF appropriation. That's right. It came out of Commerce at $1 million. House Appropriations reduced it to 900, and they did not change this one to ARPA funds. They kept this one at GF. So it's a seed capital fund. It's risk stage and seed capital through the existing VSET program, but it is targeted at COVID-related investments. And you'll see in B here, businesses that have experienced economic disruption, either through reduced new business formation, or through an unmanageable increase in new business. So this, those three things are important. You can talk about those later, but whether you had less demand and were suffering loss, or you newly formed a business, or even your business exploded and now you need help with your growth and your plan and your investment strategies, etc., this could be more expansive than otherwise would be permitted under the federal funds. You'll see eligibility here. It's Vermont businesses that are for-profit, except where other significant state appropriated CRF funds have been directed. So it does not include, they're excluding traditional in-person retail operations, lodging, hospitality, and real estate operations, and restaurant and food service. So that's a grant program, again, through VSET, Fast Capital, and then it was not necessarily grants, could be other kinds of investments, but it's seed capital investment. And then section 14, 10 VSA 291, this is actually changing the statute where the fund is created, and it adds in 3B here, talking about the composition of the Board of Advisors. And B says those appointing authorities would coordinate their appointments to ensure the board comprises advisors with diverse professional and personal backgrounds and experiences, including representation of women and BIPOC identified individuals. That's the end.
So this is envisioned as one-time drop of 900,000 into the existing seed capital fund, which I assume is in a position now where it doesn't have a lot of money to give out.
Yeah, it is recapitalizing the seed capital fund, which at this point, I don't believe has any money left.
I was going to say, I don't know that there's anything to build on. Well, we'll hear from David about this, but I thought it was down. I didn't think it had anything in it right now. This is seeding the seed capital fund, I think.
Yes.
So do you have any insight as to why, if they tie it at least partially to COVID, why they didn't use ARPA funds?
Because of, out of these three purposes, really only one, I think, qualifies for the federal COVID monies. And that would be businesses that have suffered, a reduction in revenue. New businesses may have a hard time qualifying because they can't show a COVID-related loss. And then businesses that have had an unmanageable increase in new business presumably are doing so well that they're growing and need further investment.
Okay. Yeah, we definitely have David in for this. Okay. Any other questions for David Hall before we move on to Chris Cochran? Sorry to move so fast here, but I did want to do a review of 159, we got slowed down a little bit. If there are no further questions, we're going to move right along to Chris Cochran to tell us the history and future of the Better Places program as envisioned and implemented thus far by the administration and others. So thank you all for being here. We have a long list of witnesses, and we're going to try and do tourism as well after our second break. So take it away, Chris. You know the drill.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Chris Cochran, Department of Housing and Community Development. I look forward to telling you a little bit about the history of the bill, but I would add that you guys are really important to the future of this program. So I'm hoping we can catch your attention and get you excited about this. Quick context, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of kind of how we got to where we are. Richard Amore is our downtown and village center coordinator. He's going to go next. He's going to give you a lot more details about the program and talk more about the pilot program we were able to stand up. I'm incredibly thankful to Chris Miller, who's here from Michigan. He helped stand up a similar program in Michigan, and he's going to be able to talk about the efficacy of crowd granting and how crowd granting has leveraged local funding to support grassroots community and economic development projects. And then I'm also thankful to our program partners who helped stand up the pilot. And I don't want to steal their thunder, but I think they're mostly going to explain why this program makes sense from their various lenses, be it historic preservation, equity, inclusion, economic and community development, et cetera, arts, rural Vermont, et cetera. This bill before you represents kind of a 3-year effort to make Vermont's grant-making process easier and more equitable and more fair. Vermont is incredibly fortunate to have kind of this network of nonprofit and state partners who work together. We meet quarterly. We talk about different projects, how we can support communities in these economic and community development efforts. And working together, we support hundreds of good projects every year. But navigating kind of this Gordian knot of different grant rules, applications, funding, timelines, and requirements is not easy. And we're finding that this complexity tends to reward projects who can hire consultants and grant writers to help them get the money. It's not fair. While the system's good for consultants, it frustrates me that well-resourced communities actually often get the money, and the communities that need the help the most don't. So we're hoping Better Places can kind of just blow all this up and turn things around and make the system more fair. It's worked incredibly well in other states. Chris can talk to you about Michigan's experience, but Indiana has run a similar program, and it's also worked in Massachusetts. What's incredibly powerful about crowdfunding is it empowers communities to kind of get things done. Instead of complicated applications that require the consultants to complete, Better Places provides the coaching and support communities need to design and market good projects. Instead of waiting months and months and months after your grant's been submitted for approval or denial, Better Places provides the funding when the project is ready to go, when the communities have raised their local match. Instead of closed-door grant review panels, Better Places uses small donations to prove their project viability. And I think an easy way for elected officials to understand this is, kind of think about your campaigns. A self-funded campaign is probably not going to be as successful at the polls as a campaign where you are getting lots of small donations from a lot of people. So it's a different way to prove project viability. And instead of waiting for somebody else in town to do the project, by making the process easier and simpler, it allows local communities, small groups of people, to come together to identify a problem, identify a need, and solve it themselves and get it done. So that's a high-level overview. Richard will tell you more about the details. I wanted to quickly give you a little bit of a background on kind of the bill itself. Last year, we worked on this. House Commerce supported $250,000 in funding for Better Places. It was an innovative, creative program. The community was really excited and engaged about it. Then COVID hit, and kind of everything kind of ground to a halt. Attention was turned elsewhere. We rebranded Better Places as a way to support businesses that were struggling. We needed more space on sidewalks and streets so businesses and restaurants could continue to operate safely. Commerce liked that idea. They supported $2 million in funding for that. It came over to your committee. You passed it out, but in kind of the haze and confusion and the fog of kind of the end of the session, and I think the critical needs for communities to get the grants to support, not communities, for businesses to get the grants, the $2 million in funding was cut. It was a little heartbreaking, but we dusted it off and we tried again through the joint fiscal committee process to fund the program. That was not working very well for us, and we were running out of money, or running out of time for the CRF funding. At the time, the clock was going to expire in December, and it just didn't make a whole lot of sense for us to stand up a program with federal dollars. So we reached out to our partners, and we were able to raise, I think, about $130,000 to stand up a pilot program to prove the project's viability. Response was tremendous, and Richard's going to tell you a little bit more about that. But here we are again, this time asking for a $5 million allocation of funding, of one-time money, to create the Better Places program to support community placemaking and help our downtowns and village centers kind of quickly bounce back from COVID and restart community life once again. And with that, I'm going to quit.
So, Chris, could you get to us in writing a description of all the programs that you say are an impediment in terms of small communities being able to navigate the application process and bring it to success, where this would be a better alternative? I'm thinking that if we're talking about downtown development or pocket parks and those kinds of things, that a place where where you've seen that experience, where it's not meeting need, is like CBDG and downtown credits. Can you give the Arts Council, can you give a list of all the places where people are going now, where they could go now, but they're being shut out because of the difficulty in navigating or the competition or whatever the reasons are? I just want to see in writing all the places that fund these kinds of things presently.
Okay. Yeah, I certainly know about the programs that we run. You know, the Community Development Block Program is a federal program. It is very complicated. You have to have a consultant to qualify for that. And I will certainly reach out to our partners to identify their programs. But this occupies a niche that's quite different and quite innovative and different from kind of how we typically do grant making in the state. But I'll get you that list.
Okay, thank you. So you're sort of the ringleader here. You're saying we should go to who
Richard.
next? Richard? Richard.
Richard.
Good morning, Richard. Welcome.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you, committee chair and committee members, for your time. I'm Richard Amore with the Department of Housing and Community Development. Thanks for inviting us to speak this morning about the Better Places program. Quickly first, just a little bit about me, because this is my first time in the committee. You know, I'm a professional planner and landscape architect serving as the planning and outreach manager for our team, which means during normal times, I'm a road warrior traveling across the state, helping villages and downtowns, providing direct technical assistance, coordinating and connecting local leaders with state and regional economic development partners, resources, and funding opportunities to revitalize their village centers and downtowns. And as we saw this past year, public spaces matter more now than ever. We saw how communities and businesses quickly responded with creativity and grit to adapt streets and public spaces to better serve the needs of the community and the local businesses. These grants will support and build off those local recovery efforts, like closing streets and opening them up to pedestrians, shoppers, restaurants, small business owners, or activating village greens through performing arts, music, or cultural programming to add that spark, that vitality coming out of COVID into our downtowns and villages. And Better Places is a new grant program that's about building community, not just implementing projects. You know, traditionally, we've invested capital, grant funds, state and public investment into physical infrastructure, both public and private, that gives little thought to whether we are investing in community building or civic infrastructure. Civic infrastructures are physical places where community building occurs, like parks and village greens, libraries, schools, recs and senior centers, farmers markets, main streets, and other community gathering spaces. The Better Places grants are all about building that civic infrastructure that empowers local leaders to be part of the solution, advancing local recovery efforts, and strengthening community pride. And these investments matter, and it's place-based, people-focused economic development. Because investments in place matter because people matter, and place determines people's health, wealth, happiness more than anything else. And this program is all about supporting community-led projects that create, improve, or revitalize public spaces near where people live, work, and visit. It's about expanding access and opportunity to public spaces and community gathering areas in our downtowns, villages, and neighborhoods near where people live and accessible without a car. These projects are key in knitting our communities back together coming out of COVID. These inclusive spaces and activities provide more people with the opportunity to build trust with others, get to know their neighbors, cross paths with people of different backgrounds, build trust that ripples out into economic opportunities, less inequality, more civic participation, and more effective communal problem solving. It's about broadening that conversation to ensure diverse voices are heard and have multiple platforms to meaningfully engage, and the opportunity to co-create public spaces with the people who love the place the most, the residents, and its economic development, grounded in place, supported by the community. And there's no better tourism draw, better marketing, or talent recruitment strategy than investing in vibrant places where people want to live, work, and visit. And as Chris mentioned, programmatically, we know from our experience that traditional state granting processes are not as equitable as they could be. Municipalities and nonprofits with the resources, capacity, and cash match are better positioned for state and federal grants. The crowdfunding model offers a different approach, with no formal application process, lowering the barrier to access these grants and putting the access of these funds in the hands of community members. It's a streamlined process where grant funders no longer pick winners and losers in the application process, but rather allow the community to show the demand and support and value for these projects. It's really a change in how governments and funders think about the granting process from a closed door review process to a more public submission, review, and approval process. And Better Places will combine both placemaking and crowdfunding to help communities improve themselves. And the practice of crowdfunding aims to fund projects by raising small amounts of funds from a large amount of people, democratizing the access to capital, and enabling local residents to invest their dollars on projects they find valuable within their community. We are also going to partner with a civic-based crowdfunding platform that will provide technical assistance, capacity, and coaching to help these communities develop a fundraising plan, market the project, and ensure the crowdfunding goal is met and the project is a success, providing that extra capacity to communities. The program is helping communities invest in themselves, connecting state resources to local giving and philanthropy to create or activate public spaces to bring much needed vitality back to our main streets. And crowdfunding will be a tool to empower communities, broaden that conversation for community engagement and buy-in for these locally driven projects. And it's no different than what we've been doing for decades in Vermont and elsewhere with community bake sales, car washes, jam jars at general stores, raising funds from the community, the crowd, to support local projects. Finally, I want to share some data points that we learned from the pilot. As Chris said, with gracious support from our partners, we ran a successful pilot kind of showing proof of concept. We offered $130,000 in grant funds to 8 communities last month. We received 63 applications for 54 communities. And let's remember, we ran this pilot at the worst time of the year when nonprofits were doing their taxes for the end of the year, when communities were getting ready for their town meeting and developing their local budgets. The program was launched in the middle of December, right before the holidays. So we received 63 applications from 54 communities, representing 38 villages, 24 downtowns, requesting nearly $1 million in grant funds for the only $130,000 available. Grants range from $5,000 to $20,000, with the average grant request of $15,694. No match was required in the pilot. We didn't do the crowdfunding platform because of the time sensitivity of the pilot, but 49 applications, almost 80% of the applications provided some cash match, and the average cash match was over $20,000. A few larger projects skew those numbers. However, removing those larger projects, the average match was still over $9,000. The lowest match was $603, and the largest was $380,000, leveraging over $1.2 million in grant funds. These matching funds came from other state and federal grants, local and state philanthropy, municipal funds, local fundraising, and corporate support. Projects came in from all over the state, from Alburgh to Brattleboro to Rupert to Canaan. Projects were represented in every county, with almost 25% of the applications from Chittenden and Washington counties, but over 75% were from the rest of the state. And like I said earlier, we funded 8 projects across the state in Barton, Ludlow, Northfield, Middlesex, Rutland City, Springfield, White River Junction, and Wilmington. And these projects varied from transforming an underutilized parking lot in White River Junction through visual arts and outdoor film screenings to revitalizing Northfield's town common by providing better lighting, public art, and outdoor seating, or supporting developing walking paths and river overlooks in Middlesex, or building an amphitheater to host local events at community gardens in Bartons. And then lastly, a reflection that really hit home to me, and that was a heartwarming story from the pilot. Many of the applicants that did not get funded, from Rupert to Richmond, reached out to me afterwards. And they were very grateful for this opportunity. Even though they didn't get funding, they learned and they built new partnerships and discovered new energy. And they're making these projects happen, even though at a scaled down version of these projects. But through applying through the grant program, they built new partnerships and new collective energy to make things happen in their communities. And these small and big investments in public spaces, streets, and downtowns and villages matter, because place matters, because people matter. Place determines health, wealth, happiness more than anything else. And building that community pride and social capital and fostering attachment to place is key to community revitalization and rural economic development. And as funders, we are not only interested in just solving problems in communities, but empowering communities and local leaders to be part of the solution. And this program inspires local action, small but meaningful and impactful improvements to our downtowns and village gathering spaces that build community, foster a sense of belonging, and create, well, better places. And what we invest in coming out of this time of crisis will define the future of Vermont. Our very success in fighting for equality, preparing for future pandemics, and related threats like climate change depends on more trust, more empathy, more community building, more local empowerment, more civic participation, and more economic opportunity, not less. We desperately need investments in public spaces and civic infrastructure that rebuild our trust, help our economic recovery, and build a belief in a better future for every Vermonter and our brave little state. Investing in better places is a start in the right direction. Thank you for your time, and welcome any questions.
Senator Rahm. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Richard.
Thank you, Richard. I mean, first of all, I haven't, met you before, I think, in my 4 years out of state government, but I'm really glad you're there. That was really impassioned and, worth a lot of money. We don't always hear a plea that's worth the amount of money that's being asked for, but really appreciate that. You answered part of my question, which is trying to make sure there's a project in every county. But I'd love to hear, without us being too prescriptive in our legislative language, what other parameters would amount to success for you all? Different kinds of organizations, a diversity of people, maybe putting the projects forward. I mean, crowdfunding is still kind of a new and gourmet concept for, new Americans or people who don't often feel like they can be at the head of the table in placemaking, even though they probably do a lot of crowdfunding, so I just want to make sure the way we describe this and bring people in offers a lot of technical assistance for those who are not used to demonstrating the capital that they've raised, or, being working in partnership with state government. I think this is a real opportunity to help others be at the head of the table in placemaking that haven't been before. And I'd love to hear folks talk about what that would look like.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator Rahm. Couple quick reflections, and then I'll let our other partners kind of describe it more. Part of the proposal and part of the pilot, actually, we allowed some of the grant funds to be used for capacity building, local, leadership, kind of having somebody champion the project. Oftentimes, state grants don't provide that piece, and it's a key gap because a lot of the smaller rural communities or underserved neighborhoods don't have professional staff or something like that. So this allows them to have a quarterback or somebody to help drive the project, help lead the fundraising efforts, and really make sure the project's a success with the diverse, partners. And then the second thing with the crowdfunding model that we propose, and as you see in the legislation, there is a higher number that you see normally for state grant funds for program administration at 15% in the current legislation. And the reasons for that is to provide direct technical assistance to ensure communities can meet their crowdfunding goals, to ensure that they have the coaching needed for project development, to ensure they have the coaching needed for marketing, to make sure people are engaged in the project, because it's about really co-creating the project together with the community and providing those resources to do that, along with providing translation services or other things to need to address populations that maybe not traditionally accessing state grant funds in an equitable way. And I'm sure some of our partners will share a little bit more about that, but we have thought about that. The House Commerce Committee even pushed our thinking in a positive way to expand how we could use these funds to really be more equitable and access and approach.
And, Mr.
Senator
Chairman, I ask
Clarkson.
a
Senator
question?
Clarkson.
Hi, Richard, welcome. I'm Allison Clarkson. You talked, I'd love to know what was the average, you talked about the average grant size, but I'd love to know what the average number of people, the average number of people who contributed to these projects. When you talk about the crowdfunding, what was the average number of people in each of those communities that contributed? Do you have a notion of that?
So with the pilot, we didn't do the crowdfunding piece because we didn't have the time to stand up a crowdfunding platform. But each of the applications had various and strong in-kind support, strong partnerships, and of course, each one varied with how many. But the House Commerce Committee and really thought the in-kind support was a big piece because we demonstrated that the applicants demonstrated that, so they added that language into the bill. We could look back through the applications to see, but I think a better metric would be from the other states. We've reached out and talked to the program managers, and they're seeing an average of 200 donors per campaign, and these are for small grants, $5,000 to $50,000 grants. Some campaigns are having more donors than people who actually live in town because they're second homeowners or just people who from the region are really committed to the project. So it really is shows that the rural communities, as well as the big cities or urban neighborhoods, are able to access these funds and show community support through multiple donors.
Great. So that's, I guess, a question for Chris Miller when Chris testifies. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Senator Clarkson.
Thank you, Richard. Your enthusiasm is palpable.
Yeah, and contagious.
Let me ask a couple of questions. The money came from the Vermont Community Loan Fund and some other source. Is that correct?
No, sir. It came from the partners you see on the call today. It was seeded by the Vermont Community Foundation, the National Life Group Foundation, the Vermont Arts Council, and Preservation Trust of Vermont. Initially, we had $90,000 for the pilot, but through our partnership for the past couple of years, the Department of Health had remaining funds from a CDC grant because they were using a lot of their funding for CARES Act funding for contact tracing, and had some extra funds available to support this type of work, healthy community work. And they had provided additional $40,000 so we could provide 2 more grants through the pilot.
So I'm a little unclear in terms of, one of the advantages that you're talking about is the simplicity and the lack of bureaucracy and the ability to fund these projects. But how, of the 130,000, all the applications you got for the $130,000, how did you decide which projects to fund and which not to fund?
It was one of the hardest things I've done in my professional career. It was like picking your favorite child. There were so many great projects that came through. There was a cross-sector review panel of all our funders who reviewed, evaluated each of the applications, read them, and scored and ranked them, just like we do with traditional state grant programs. And there's an evaluation process that's in a closed door meeting. And that's what we're trying to throw on its head through the crowdfunding model. Rather than being a closed door review process, it's more a public vetting process by the community to determine their local priorities. And then if they meet their crowdfunding goal, they automatically get the match and the grant.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get at. So it's envisioned, I haven't read with a lot of detail the language that the House came up with. You're saying that this program, once it's going, if you raise X amount of dollars from X amount of people, you automatically get the money, no matter.
Absolutely. You do have to meet, you still do have to fill out and it's through more of a coaching process, less paternalism and more kind of partnerships. And really, but you do still have to fill out, and answer some questions in application. There's no formal application process, but as funders, we need to demonstrate that they have ownership of the land, if it's on a nonprofit or public property, that it's open and accessible to the public. It's has community engagement, and all the things that we asked for in the pilot will still be there. But rather than us reviewing them.
So it's a first come, first serve. If you run until you run out of money, you just keep giving it out with no criteria.
Well, there is criteria addressed that you have to meet through the application process. That's more of a coaching process. You have to meet that criteria, and then you get the green light to start your crowdfunding campaign. And if you meet, you get the green light to start your crowdfunding campaign, you automatically, you meet the crowdfunding goal, you automatically get the 3-to-1 match.
The crowdfunding.
I do want to be.
The crowdfunding goal is an amount of money or amount of participants or donors or both?
Right now it is set at as 25% of the project. So if you have a $10,000 project, you have to raise $2,500 to get the $7,500 grant.
Okay, so is it first come, first serve on getting the green light? It is money here.
It is on a rolling basis. There is only one community, one municipality allow a grant per calendar year, but it is on a rolling basis until funds get extinguished, and that's how the other state programs are doing it. I do want to be mindful too of time, because I know a few of our witnesses have to leave by like 9:50 or 10 o'clock, and I'd love for them to have a chance to talk.
Okay, well, let's focus on those witnesses. It's 9. We'll go straight till 10 to accommodate those people before we take a break. Who are the people who need to leave? Chris, you want to pick the order here, please? You're muted.
Chris Miller should go next. He ran the program in Michigan, or helped stand up the program in Michigan. And then Ben Doyle and Sarah Waring. They can flip. I think they both have 10 o'clock meetings, but I think Chris has to leave a little earlier.
Chris, welcome.
Thank you, Senators. Mr. Chair, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. I hate having to follow Richard, however. I'm not sure I can match his enthusiasm, but I will do my level best. So a very quick background for me. I've neatly divided my career into 3 pieces. So one third of it is in education, a third of it has been in the for-profit world, and a third of it has been in nonprofit and government work. The latter third is in that piece. So about a decade ago, a little bit more than that now, I started doing work as an economic developer in a small community, 22,000 in southern Michigan, a city called Adrian. And that was my first sort of formal blush with economic development and an employment perspective. I had previously been appointed and elected as a local city commissioner, and served also in a downtown development authority board as well. So my interest in this began really from an economic development perspective. After the Great Recession, it was pretty tough finding capital to help businesses expand or start or grow in our community. And so, like others, I cast around to find a way to basically get more capital to help things happen in our communities. And as a result of that, I ended up being involved in an investment crowdfunding law that happened here in Michigan, part of a organic movement that swept really across the country, where today 37 states have a state-based investment crowdfunding law, and the federal government also has one in place. And that was kind of a precursor to Michigan's program, which is called Public Spaces, Community Places, which is quite similar to what you are proposing with the Better Places program. So a colleague of mine who worked for the state economic development entity in the community development side of that organization really developed the program. She heard about our investment crowdfunding law, loved the idea of crowdfunding for many of the same reasons that Chris and Richard have articulated about the development and building of community. She managed to find some resources at the state level that were available, and she convinced her boss to put this program together. And in Michigan, the parameters are similar. The community is required to come up with a match, and when the community comes up with a match, following the initial parameters, and essentially for us, it's quite simple language: activate a public space, and that's generally the fundamental criteria. To say the program has been wildly successful would be an understatement here in Michigan. We have had to this moment 247 successful campaigns over the 6-year life of the program. I think it's worth noting that this program has been evaluated by independent organizations and entities, including Harvard, that made it a finalist in Innovation in Government Programs in 2015, and the International Economic Development Council, which awarded it a gold as an innovative practice for governments to do. What's been really fantastic in Michigan is prior to our equivalent of your Better Places program, most of the economic development money in the state went to 6 communities, 6 large communities. And all of those small communities that Vermont is wonderfully filled with, in Michigan never got any money. And after the Public Spaces campaign was put in place, we saw this remarkable disbursement of funds matching locally sourced projects and locally backed projects all across the state, in the smallest communities to the largest communities. My own community has done 4 of these projects, 3 of which were eligible for the match money available from the state because of the focus of the project. And I was involved in all 3 of them. The first of those was a park. So we have a wonderful Rails to Trails project that runs through the middle of my county, and it runs actually through downtown Adrian. And we did not have sort of any place to stop there. And so we created a park, a little mini park right in the downtown where the trail went through, where people could sit down on a bench and get something to drink and lock their bikes up and walk into the rest of the downtown. And that was our first project. That project ran a total of about $175,000. The match that we got for that project, so we raised about $25,000 and got a $25,000 match. So it was about 1/3 of the project total, or a little bit less than that for that project. We also had some foundation money that was in that, as well as some Parks and Rec money that were public funds through the city of Adrian. The second project we did was attached to a renovation. So we have a historic opera house, a theater that is still vibrant in downtown Adrian. It's 153 years old right now. And it's gone through some interesting cycles, as you might understand what's happening and happened in some of your communities. Near demolition in the 60s before some families got together and said, we can't allow this to go. And then about 5 years ago, underwent a massive, about $8 million renovation of the interior and exterior of the building. And as part of that project, they wanted to create an interesting and new public space so that didn't require you to buy a ticket to go in, but was a place where you could gather and hear smaller scaled performances or musical entertainment or get a bite to eat. And so that space was created as a public space, raised a $50,000 match from the community and got a $50,000 match from the grant program. Again, the project total was more like $150,000, so about 1/3 of the project. Senator Clarkson, you asked for some numbers, and we actually have some numbers that were done through about this time last year. And so I'm going to read those off to you. So at that point in time, as I said, we've done 247 projects as of today. At that point in time, there were 212 projects done. There were 39,460 patrons, and they raised $7,609,000, got matching grants for $6,405,000. And the total funding for those projects then was about $14 million. So the average number of investment for these 212 projects, or the average number of investors was 186 investors in each of those projects.
Thank you. That's great. We'd love to have you send those to us if you're able. That would be great, those numbers.
Richard knows I will send you anything and more than you want. So I'm very happy to do that.
Is
Great.
there a written report on the Michigan experience?
There is.
Okay, can we just get that sent to our?
I will absolutely get that sent to you for sure. Yeah. And again, it's about a year old, so it has not been updated to my knowledge. I actually reached out to the MEDC and have not heard back if they've updated that as of today. The other piece I think that's germane for the discussion today is I'm doing a fellowship this year through Michigan State University. They have a federally funded Regional Center for Economic Innovation. And I proposed, as part of some national work that I'm doing with actually one of my favorite colleagues in North America is a Vermonter, Janice Shade from Milk Money. Some of you know Janice, I think. So Janice is one of the founding board members, along with me and several other folks for the National Coalition for Community Capital. And we are all about community, and we are all about making the tools of local investors and local donors have a difference in their communities. And so we're working on some really interesting stuff nationally. In addition to that, my fellowship with Michigan State University is looking to do the same thing, make more individuals in communities, investors in their own communities, in some cases for a financial return, in other cases like this program for a civic return, which incidentally also brings a financial return. Richard referenced placemaking. It's gigantic, it's global now. Michigan and Vermont were some of the early states that recognized the power of having great public spaces. And the entire economic development world has evolved from chasing smokestacks to building local communities through placemaking. And it's phenomenal. I've watched that take place over the last 15 years, but it really is important. But in any event, my fellowship is about helping communities learn how to continue to build on some of the successes they've had. So I'm going to all 247 communities and having conversations with them about how they can do more projects like that one. And so I've been working on this for the last couple of months, and I've heard just some fantastic stories about what happens in communities when around this project. But in all of them, without fail, there's this wonderful feeling of accomplishment. There's this wonderful building of community, and there's this wonderful development of an asset, which is going to be beneficial to everybody in the community, folks that they want to attract to it, where it's tourism or residents that they want to attract, and businesses who are all about quality of life. You know, 15 years ago, economic developers were busy trying to bring big businesses in. And the benchmark was, if you have good roads, if you have good fire and good police and good schools, you're set. That is not the bar anymore. Today, the bar is you better have high quality of life. You better have attributes in the arts, in recreation, et cetera. And if you don't, you will not bring businesses. Businesses won't stay. Talent will not stay. You know, talent attraction and is the big thing happening in economic development, and it's all about quality of place. And so the work that you guys are doing is fantastic, and this will really add on to it. So, all right, I'll be quiet. If you've got any questions, I would be happy to answer. Richard, if there's something else I should have said, he briefs me very carefully on this. And so if it's something I missed that I should have said, please let me know. I'll be glad to articulate it.
May I just say something, Mr. Chair? I don't know if you can see us.
Yes, I can see all of you.
Thanks. This totally builds on the work we did many years ago on the creative economy here in Vermont.
Yep.
And we know that one of the main reasons people come to Vermont and people stay in Vermont is quality of life.
Yep.
And quality of life is, we're absolute. I think most of us are pretty grounded in wanting to improve quality of life, and have understood since our work on the creative economy that is one of the main reasons people work, stay, live, build a life, build businesses, and live here in Vermont. So thank you. This work totally complements that work.
It
So-
it absolutely does. And I would also add, I actually have recommended, even though I'm a Michigander born and bred, I have recommended to my own children that they go to Vermont and live and work there because of that, because of those issues and the opportunities that are there. So it
Yeah,
was
but-
painful for me to do that, but I did. I don't have any other state I can say that about. So
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for that endorsement. And thank you for your testimony. So did the Michigan program start out similar to Vermont with an appropriation from the state legislature, and how much was that appropriation for?
So essentially it did. The Michigan Economic Development Corporation is funded by the state legislature, and they have some latitude in how those funds are allocated. You know, their overall budget is approved, the programming that they do, et cetera, is all approved. But essentially it started within the MEDC, within community development, which again is given public funds. MEDC is kind of a quasi-public private entity in the state of Michigan. So and after the first year's success, they had a $700,000 allotment of cash available for that first year. They went through it in a matter of months,
And how has that progressed over the years?
yeah, and I don't know the specific numbers right now of what's allocated in the budget. But again, you know, as of a year ago, we gave out about $7 million over. So smaller bucket than you guys are looking at, I think, on a year by year basis. But I'll see if I can get those numbers to you,
I
Mr.
assume it
Chair. And
might be in the report, I would assume, but
it may be in the reporting, yeah.
okay. Chris, thank you very much, Chris. That was very helpful. And so Chris Cock, I'm going to go to Ben, right? Next. Is that correct? Okay.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ben. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be
Got some
here.
big shoes to fill, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's tricky to fill big shoes when you're hitting the ground running, but I'm trying my best. So it's wonderful to see all of you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. I think I've actually met most of you before, but my name's Ben Doyle. I'm the new president of the Preservation Trust of Vermont. I've been on the job for about 6 months. I'm sure that many of you know or knew my predecessor, Paul Bruin, who is an incredible champion for Vermont communities. And so we're all trying to continue his work as best we can. I think I've met many of you actually. In my previous role, I was the Assistant State Director for USDA Rural Development, which is a federal agency dedicated to the economic vitality and quality of life of rural America. And so I'm very excited to continue that kind of community development work at PTV. And very excited today to talk to you about the Better Places program. You know, I know many of you are probably familiar with the Preservation Trust, but just to kind of set the ground, our work is about preserving the spaces and places that Vermonters love and that represent our shared values as Vermonters. So those are places like our villages and downtowns, and those buildings that we care about say a lot about who we are and what we value. Places like general stores or community markets, town halls, opera houses. These are places where Vermonters come together to meet and welcome their neighbors, especially their new neighbors. In that sense, even though we're an organization that's focused on historic preservation, what we're really about is preserving the future of Vermont and what opportunity in Vermont looks like for communities. So we serve as a close friend to communities trying to save and activate a building, whether it's providing funding for a structural assessment, fundraising help, or implementation funding. But the key to everything we do is community building. A building without people, regardless of how historic it is just a building. It's the people inside the building and how they encounter one another that's truly important. And we've been doing this work at PTV for over 40 years. Last year, we worked on 246 preservation projects in 141 different communities. Like Richard, we're road warriors in the sense that we're, when it's safe to travel, we're on the road in all those small towns all over the state. And it's a privilege to do so. And it's that work that really led us to Better Places and why we're excited to support it. We believe that this program is about getting people together and building social capital for a stronger community. We have these incredible assets in our villages and downtowns, but the pandemic has limited Vermonters' ability to experience them and to experience one another. The Better Places program and some of the examples that Richard has talked about provides the opportunities for communities to do this again in new and innovative ways. And, you know, I feel frankly like Chris's presentation, I feel like Chris has been reading my mail around the nature of the changing nature of community and economic development. And I really appreciate the fact that people aren't just talking about like grants, we're talking about investments, because that's really what we're talking about. And, you know, many times returns on investment in economic development take decades to realize. And if we think about all the significant investments that we've made in our villages and downtowns through the tax credit program, through brownfield remediation, through wastewater infrastructure, you know, those are critical foundational investments in our villages and downtowns. But we also need to have multiple kinds of investments to balance the portfolio of what we're trying to do. We need programs with a high return in the short term to preserve the other longer term investments that we have. So let me try to be a little bit more specific in that. This program, we believe, protects previous investments in villages and downtowns by revitalizing them, by re-energizing them. You know, we've done all this great work in saving our villages and downtowns, but if we don't have people in them, if there isn't the opportunity for them to gather, all of those investments are at risk. We've seen, as Chris was talking about and others, we're seeing the incredible potential for in-migration to Vermont, which could reverse some of the demographic challenges we've been facing for decades. We need the hard infrastructure to accommodate them. Things like broadband, wastewater, housing, those are all critical. But in an era of remote work, many people are going to choose communities with a high quality of life and a sense of community. I think that we can be really confident that a lot of people are going to look to come to Vermont. The real question is, will they stay? And what kind of community will they encounter when they come here? And that's why we need to invest in this kind of social infrastructure to ensure that they do. The second thing I would say that is really innovative about this program and why we're excited to support it is that the program increases opportunity for equity. Because the community match component and the way in which it's structured, smaller towns, often the ones that we work with that have had, frankly, the hardest time recovering from the last recession, are going to have greater access to capital and greater opportunity. I'm really confident that some of our larger towns in Chittenden County, even though they're going to be struggling, I feel confident that they're going to be able to revitalize relatively quickly. But when we start thinking about the other towns, communities like Richford, communities like Sheffield, Pownell, these towns that really are going to need that additional spark to help them come out of this time and build their community and protect their investments, they're going to need that kind of additional support. And then the final thing that I would say, and I really believe that this is critical, it's not just the projects themselves. It's not about a piece of public art or a revitalized green space. It's about the skill building that happens as a result of this kind of collaboration. And this is the key kind of dividend of this investment, is that what you're talking about is building transferable skills in a community that can, once they build that project with the support from Better Places, they can start using that social capital that they've built on other projects that frankly might not even need that public investment. But the other grant programs that we have, the other tools that we have for community and economic development in the state, both at the federal level and the state level, there isn't a model that does it in the same way. And so I feel like that's a really key link here. At the risk of kind of annoying the partners on the call who have heard me use this really tired analogy before, I'm going to do it one more time and then I'm never going to use it again. I really think of our villages and downtowns in Vermont like an old diesel engine. And an old diesel engine will run forever if you treat it right. But on a cold Vermont morning when it's 20 below, you have a really hard time turning it over. And I feel like that's what's going on right now. We're coming out of this pandemic. We have this incredible infrastructure, but it's a cold morning and that needs a little help. And with an engine, you got to spray a little ether in the manifold when you turn it over to get it kicking and running. And that's what I see this program as a little shot in the arm, a little ether in the manifold that can get that engine running, and it will do so consistently. I would just finally say that PTV, you know, I have enormous respect for the people at Agency of Commerce and Community Development who developed this program. We know that I worked with them when I was at USDA. I worked with them as they were thinking about this project. When we saw that there was a need to fund a pilot version of this program to prove the concept, we stepped up and made for us what was a significant investment in making the pilot happen. And that's because we believe in it. And I have to say that we do, that was we were happy to make that investment as a proof of concept, but we also believe that ultimately this is a public responsibility. Just as we fund wastewater infrastructure for the vitality of our communities, it makes sense to fund opportunities for social capital. And I really hope that you'll continue to support this program. And I thank you again for the opportunity and welcome any questions if you have any.
Thank you. That was great. And it's great to see you in your new capacity.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you, Ben. That was really good. Does anybody have any questions for Ben at this point? Okay, we're going to move on to Sarah. One of the things I hope we can hear about shortly are a few examples of what the funding has been used for in Vermont, and what you envision a little bit more about what form they may take. So thank you again, Ben, and Sarah, you're on, and we'll get you out of here before 10.
Mr. Chair, before we get started, Senator Ballin, I just want to say, hello, cousin. I miss you.
Okay, we got a cousin.
Hi, Senator.
Can't wait till we're on the other side of the pandemic.
It's
Okay.
lovely to see you on my
Nice
screen.
to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senators. It's an honor to be here today. It's nice to have this opportunity to speak about this program. My name is Sarah Waring. My role is at the Vermont Community Foundation as the Vice President for Grants and Community Investments. At the Community Foundation, as you probably know, we focus on the opportunity gap framework for our grant making and investment strategies. This means we are focused on increasing access to early care, to skills and education, to good jobs and vibrant communities and a thriving economy within a healthy ecosystem, so that those who typically have not had access to these things or have failed in their own lives to reach their full potential really can have access to those opportunities and level the playing field. From projects like the Putnam Block in Bennington to a recovery center in the Northeast Kingdom, the Community Foundation is there across the state. These opportunity gap values guide our work and helped us to design a COVID response strategy as well last year. Over this last year of COVID, the Community Foundation has moved almost $9 million, which for us is pretty significant. And we've been extremely proud to work with various state agencies, legislative caucuses, and the administration over the course of the past year. I served on the governor's economic mitigation task force in the local and community action team. We've been sitting in on the social equity caucus, but we've also worked with the Department of Public Service, assisting the communication union districts. And we've assisted the Agency of Administration with the Economic Stimulus Equity Fund program. And we helped to launch the Better Places Through Philanthropic Dollars last year. So I just want to say that we've experienced an incredible degree of collaboration and alignment around philanthropy and the public sector in this last year to help Vermont recover and transform from the pandemic, and to see it as an opportunity for transformation. It's so clear that so many Vermonters have been working together to look at challenges from systemic racism to recovery for the pandemic, and to think about those as an opportunity for a better future for all of us. Last year, we stood up 5 recovery initiatives with the philanthropic dollars that we had. These included rural entrepreneurship, rural connectivity, food system resilience, but many of them are critical levers for economic recovery from a crisis. We built in particular the Rural Entrepreneurship Initiative because we know from past research that rural communities that support small business development recover faster from a recession. We also know that Vermont has a nascent network of business incubators and service providers and so on. And we know that the quality of life and community identity create competitive advantage. And that is part of what makes our state special. So Ben mentioned some of this, Richard mentioned some of this, but incoming businesses, COVID refugees, and the next potential owners of Vermont's place-based businesses are looking for a place they want to locate. This is the perfect time to invest in the self-identity, the creative design, and the public celebration of community when we are competing in many ways for workers and business owners of this next chapter of Vermont. Last year, though, we also moved around $500,000 to communities and grassroots leaders and institutional leaders to support welcoming and equitable and anti-racist communities in Vermont. We recognize that people of color, Indigenous leaders, Asian Vermonters, and many other historically marginalized folks have been left out consistently of envisioning a better future for their towns. And we know this can't continue either. So what does rural entrepreneurship and anti-racist communities have to do with better places? These goals, when you bring them together, are precisely the kind of future that the Better Places program seeks to tap into. Building a place with authentic engagement with a wide range of community members that will leverage its own resources and assets to showcase its public identity and create a welcoming and business-friendly environment. This program also pushes communities to create safe and inclusive and vibrant and artistic and walkable public spaces and to break down feelings of being left out. So for us, the agency's program feels like an answer to these questions. First, it's about alignment and community leadership. It, as you've heard, combines a lot of previously organized or supported work. Everything from designated downtowns to AARP's technical assistance and mini grant programs to Agency of Natural Resources and Department of Health grant rounds. We can probably draw a clear line in many cases from a VCRD community visit where a select board welcomes in a community visit process to a community supported idea, to a mini grant, to something like this in terms of community revitalization. I want to also reference Senator Rahm's question. It's not just new Americans who might not know about crowdfunding. In my previous role, I was working in Hardwick, and we, no offense to Ben and the USDA Rural Development, but we were successful in getting a community facilities USDA Rural Development program. It was incredibly complicated. We had to secure business and building plans up front. We had non-compensated time by our contractors that we had to manage for. And many rural communities have no idea of how to track and manage local fundraising projects. This is not just about new Americans. This is also about our rural towns in Vermont who don't have the capacity to pull down our state and federal funding and all of the complicated grant requirements, parameters, and tracking and evaluation that go with it. Now, this is not to say this program is without many of those really important parameters and best practices, but it includes some of the technical assistance, and Richard mentioned that before. But the other piece that we really like about this program is that it shows community support for a project. In my business, in philanthropy, we often talk about leverage. We get hundreds of grant proposals in any given year, and it was thousands last year. And we're always looking for ways to understand how a community is truly supportive of the projects that are proposed. One is that we look for inclusivity and collaboration. Who are your partners? How many other people are involved? Did you do a public process? But the other is that we look for leveraged funding. We look for other grants. We look for local fundraising. And you've heard a lot about how this program incentivizes that work and actually requires that work as an indicator for community support and leverage. But then finally, the other piece that we love about this program is that it's about coordination between state agencies. What Richard and Chris may not have shared with you is the incredible collaboration between agencies to design and vet and review and help to launch this program. I've had the opportunity to sit in on some of these meetings with the Department of Health, the Agency of Natural Resources, VTrans, and then community partners like the Arts Council, AARP, Local Motion, and others. Part of the reason why VCF has been a supporter and helped to launch the pilot last year was because we saw interdepartmental collaboration in a way that felt transformational. Before COVID, we were actually meeting with Richard and Chris to understand more about how VCF could be involved in this work. We support the Working Communities Challenge program that the Boston Federal Reserve Bank has launched in Vermont. We support a number of other collaborative funding mechanisms to help communities to determine their own future. And this felt like one that had a streamlined process was about authentic engagement of communities and again, would be efficient for funders and for fundraising. But most importantly, we were excited about that crowdfunding element of the program because it indicates leverage, but also because we believe in the voice of community to propose and then support their own future development. So we thought the structure was pretty ideal for Vermont. Now, Richard mentioned the 8 projects that were funded last year, but I do just want to say that the reason we stood up the pilot last year is because philanthropy often can be in a place to make a case for public investment. And as you heard from Ben, we believe ultimately that this is a public responsibility to support the investments, but also to envision the future, and that this program represents one that the state could and should invest in for precisely that reason. And I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So, this committee has been, very much involved in coming up with creative ways to promote the economic development, not only looking at things like, in a different context, I remember reading about the Brookings Institute report about place-based being sort of like doing infrastructure to get Amazon to come to Brooklyn versus giving money to workers to come to Brooklyn or to come to Vermont and doing something people-based more. This goes one step further, I think, in terms of it's people-based, it's community-based, and it's very attractive in that regard. So I think you'll find a lot of support for that in this committee. But just to play devil's advocate and to ask the question that I kept asking myself in your testimony, this seems like it's so much directly in the Vermont Community Foundation's wheelhouse. Why aren't you doing this? Why does state government have to do this? I mean, maybe the amount of money being asked for is more than you could handle, but if I look at the Michigan numbers, it sounds like something like that would be something you could set up a pilot project within the Community Foundation and do precisely what's being asked of state government here.
Thank you for that question. I think it's an important question to wrestle with. In terms of scale, I'll start there. In Vermont, in an average year, philanthropy represents about $300 million worth of investment in the state, total. The Vermont Community Foundation moves maybe between 18 to 20 in an average year of that. We have our opportunity gap related strategies, which for us are complex and they interrelate. We often show up in community with downtown development in our investment mechanisms rather than our granting mechanisms, partly because we simply do not have enough granting to be able to support some of the larger projects. And it is, as Richard mentioned, really hard to pick between a public park in Richmond or an amphitheater in White River Junction. It is not, what we need to be able to do is to create a mechanism by which the communities can support a project and prove that they believe in the project, show that they have leverage, and then philanthropy can come in, Senator. And I think that's the important piece of this. If a community turned to the Community Foundation and asked for some portion of match, that's where we could potentially show up. And so could local donors, right? So local citizens could crowdfund into this, local corporations, local foundations, even the Community Foundation through our grant programs could be a part of that match. But the challenge here is lining up enough funding for any individual community to get to the scale that they need to actually accomplish something. Our entire grants budget could be focused on this single program and we'd be done with all of our funding for the rest of the year. So scale is a part of that answer. But the other part that I think is important to know is that we're already there and we anticipate that our role would be in supporting much of that match funding as it comes across the door.
I guess stated alternatively, what I'm asking is, you were instrumental, I think, in getting some of the CRF money out the door, weren't you, in terms of, weren't you part of the process of women's groups or the,
No, we administered and are continuing to administer the Economic Stimulus Equity Fund,
Economic
which is
stimulus? Okay,
general funds. It is not CRF dollars because they
Okay.
were not allowed to go to
Oh.
those beneficiaries.
okay, so I got my programs confused, but, so I guess I'm asking alternatively, why can't we give you $5 million and you run this program? I mean, You're pros in this. You do this. You do
Yes.
it in some ways, the private sector versus governmental sector. I mean, it just,
Yeah.
and then you have even more incentive to match it. And we get match on match on match. And it seems like I'm playing devil's advocate here. I'm only half serious, but I hear you say, I love this, I love that, I love this about this program. It seems like a perfect fit for the Community Foundation to promote its work further. And maybe it doesn't raise to a higher priority within your organization, but certainly if you were given the resources to do it, I guess I'm asking half seriously but
Yeah.
half,
Senator,
half seriously, why we just wouldn't give you the money to do this.
Senator, I appreciate the question. And I think that you'll see in the bill that there is the ability for the agency and the department to work with folks outside of the agency to help administer this. I think that what I want to represent is that we feel a strong partnership and strong alignment with the program. We've been really supportive of the design, and we believe in the structure, and are continuing to work in partnership with Chris and his department around how to do this most efficiently and effectively. And Chris, I don't know if you want to answer that question.
Yeah, I could add too, picking up on what Sarah said about the interagency collaboration part of this, it's a really important part because a lot of these places that we'd like to make these improvements to kind of have that there going on in our communities are owned and controlled by municipalities or managed by VTrans. And there's a big significant permitting component to these projects potentially. And we have those relationships with the municipalities and with the sister agencies to ensure that a community who maybe doesn't have, or a community group that maybe doesn't have the sophistication to know what the permitting framework is going to be, how to get them those answers and how to get their project approved and moving along. So that's not in the Community Foundation's wheelhouse, and that's squarely in something that is a state agency operation and a municipal operation.
And Mr. Chair, may I just add that the title of Chris's department is the Department of Housing and Community Development. This is squarely, I think, a public sector. A part of our job is to help our communities in these kinds of capacities, and we can do it in a way that no one else can. And I think the interagency collaboration is
that's my fear.
What?
I say that's my fear.
I know, but I actually do think this is part of our job. I mean, it isn't to do the whole thing, it's to incent and to enable.
So, Chris, the $5 million in here, is that it's one-time money for 1 year, or is it expected to be carried forward money into future years?
Carry forward into several years. The grants, range from $20,000 to $50,000, and the Commerce Committee allowed us flexibility to kind of lever and adjust the matching requirements. So as we start running out of funds, we'll continue to be, we'll be able to fill in those gaps in the maps in the communities that we haven't been able to fund. I don't know how long it will last. I don't know what the burn rate will be, what the uptake rate will be, but we envision several years of being able to run this program with these one-time funds.
Do you envision the need for several positions, new positions?
No, we are. Our intent is to partner with a fiscal sponsor to do the administration of the money, so we wouldn't have to do any additional positions. And then a big component of the administrative cost is we have to go through a procurement process to hire a crowd granting platform vendor, and that's where we get the additional staffing capacity. We would still be in the middle of these conversations, but we would basically hire a contractor to help, coach the communities, design the projects, launch the fundraising campaign, crowdfunding campaign, excuse me.
Okay. Any further questions for
Well, I think
Sarah or Chris? At this point, we're going to take a 10-minute break and have the rest of the witnesses come on until about 10:45.
great.
Before we
And
move on to
think-
tourism.
after the break, Mr. Chair, it would be great to hear Richard's answer to sort of illustrating and fleshing out the projects that happen in Vermont. I think that would be terrific.
Okay, yeah, we still.
Thank you all. This was just really an inspiring first start of our day. It was a great way to start the day.
Thank you
so
very much, everybody. We'll see you at 10:10. Thank you.